Today is our first time we organize such an event, and we have received quite a lot of interest as well as some interesting questions from you guys. And we hope that our webinar today will be the first of many. So I hope you guys stick around until the end of this webinar. It's only about 17 minutes. And this year is going to be an interesting year for ITR. We're going to have a lot of activities, which I will share with you later. So 1 minute, we're about to start. Please check your audio. Make sure you can listen to us clearly. Maybe grab a little coffee or latte or whatever. And again, the session is being recorded. You will receive the recap, the slides, and a special one-on-one consultation invite afterwards. All right, starting now. It's 7:06 p.m. here in Vietnam. We've already had a quick snack and I'm ready to dive in. Wherever you are, whether it's midday in Europe or the evening in Asia, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. To our guest speaker, please go ahead and say hi in 2 or 3 sentences. Andreas, could you start?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Andreas Mittera. I'm happy to join today. And welcome everyone. We have worldwide, so some may have breakfast, some may have lunch, some may have dinner. Welcome.
Cool. How about you, Beatrice?
Hello, everyone. Beatrice from CRB HealthTech, investment fund based in Barcelona. Nice meeting you all.
Cool, thank you, Beatrice. How about you, last but not least, Maria?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, depending on what time it is where you are. I'm the head of open innovation here at Barcelona Health Hub, and when my time is to speak, I'll explain a bit more of what it is and what we do here.
Thanks, guys. We hope that the audience out there, you will learn a lot from this session from our speaker. We have prepared this session with not only founders but also builders and decision makers in mind. So for this webinar is for you guys, for people who don't need more theory but want clarity and direction. So let's get started. The webinar today is named Funding Readiness for Medtech Startups, where we connect technical validation and investor confidence. To introduce myself again, my name is Hoàng Phạm. I'm the head of business development here at ITR. I'll be your host and the first speaker today. My role is to set the tone, ask the right question, hopefully, and offer something practical that you can take back home to your team. And I'm also joined by ITR technical leaders Trích Lưu, Đông Bùi, Hảo Trần, Thắng Nguyễn. Maybe some of them will join with us later, but the whole head of technical department is here, ready to help with any in-depth question, because obviously I'm on the business side. And also a quick thank you to our commercial team, Đức Jeremy Lee, the marketing team, including Bảo Lưu, the one who's setting up this webinar, Trúc Nam Trần, and Nguyen Phu. These are the people who are behind this event. Without the rock star, this event cannot happen. They are the people who are sending you the invitation, and we will continue to give you direct care during and after this webinar. And today we're going to spend around 70 minutes together. You will hear from key 3-note speakers and a joint panel discussion. Each will cover a core aspect of medtech success, from execution to founder journey, from funding criteria and the power community. Again, this session is being recorded, and we will send you the recap along with an invitation for a one-on-one consultation. And we prepare something very special, and we call it the Medtech Funding Readiness Playbook, which is an amazing documentation that you can apply to your everyday activities. And we would love to listen from you. Our support always starts with listening. Right, so why we are here, you might already have a strong prototype or device collecting clean signals, but fundability is a different game, right? Many teams build for years, only to realize too late they missed what investors, partners, or regulators expect in a solid roadmap. I understand you guys wanted real life stories from people who are truly skin in the game. So that's where today our esteemed speaker comes in. From the founder's point of view, we have Dr. Andreas Mitterer. He's a Medtech development leader with over 20 years of experience turning complex healthcare innovations into commercially viable, regulatory compliant products who show how validation must be built from day one. From the funding angle, Ms. Beatrice Plaza Marin from CRB HealthTech will break down what funders actually look for and how you should bring your A game to the table to ensure a productive pitching session. From the community perspective, Ms. Maria Ripoll Batroli from Barcelona Health Hub will share with you how you can benefit from a community of people who speak your language and get you ready for your next funding round. I hope that each session will be short and focused and followed by some Q&A. Otherwise, you can type it in the chat and we can answer later in the end of the event. And we encourage you to be very specific. Those questions like we are trying to, or how do you handle this specific question? Not generic one, right? Because this question will unlock the best discussion. And also, maybe you came here from our landing page. So don't forget to revisit our landing page to submit your project information and NDA, because out there in the landing page, we are offering an exclusive 50 hours technical consultation offer. And just one last note, we are launching a podcast this Q4. So if you are building something meaningful, we love to feature your story. So let's begin. First, let me quickly introduce who we are and why we're here. ITR is a full stack development partner for wearable medical devices, from PCB and industrial design to firmware, software, signal processing, and regulatory advisory. We have more than 13 years of experience and a team of more than 100 persons here in Vietnam and in California, the USA, and we work across the full life cycle of the products. We are not just another outsourcing agency. We offer as a back-end technical partner for founders and R&D leaders who need to turn concepts into investor and regulatory ready products. Our work span across 16 plus countries and includes contributions to Class 2 and Class 3 FDA approved devices, such as ambulatory ECG monitors and neurological tracking platforms with AI. So it depends on your role. For early stage founders or CTOs, we shape fundables, certifiable product strategies. For corporate R&D teams, we take on complex modules like miniaturization, power optimization, or compliance. For investor or community builders, we have de-risked portfolio through early technical validation. And we are also expanding into semi-invasive and hybrid care device. And it's a new field that we love to discover into, and that is built on our work in wireless, power efficiency, and system integration. This year, we also, you'll find us at the medical trade in Thailand in September, and also we'll have a counter in the Medica Düsseldorf in Germany this November. So reach out to us if you are there. And in the podcast I mentioned earlier, we will discuss some things like validation, ICE 62304, HIPAA, and the hurdles in between. So if you have some story, we'd love to feature you. Our certification and our capability remain strong. We will renew our ISO 13485 this year, and also maintain our compliance with ISO 27001, and expanding our team with more certificate in PMP and AWS. So whenever you're building the first prototype or preparing for submission or building the new project in your corporation, we're here to support, right? So regarding the first piece of content, and talk about the core reason why we are here. Many of you in this room have already built an impressive prototype Maybe the signal is clean, the board works, and maybe even the app is live. But when you ask the investor, things start to stall. What we observe, and I'm speaking as someone who's worked with both founders and investors, is that in tech, working in tech doesn't automatically means investor ready. That gap can be summed up in one idea, and we call it funding readiness. And shout out to Anafo from our team for came up with that idea. And let me share two cases that represent two scenarios that we work with, both technically promising, but both struggling to move forward. The first one was a team building an in-hospital vital signs monitoring platform. The premise was compelling, a wearable patch for a mandatory patient that continuously measure heart rate, respiratory rate, and temperatures, with edge processing that filter artifacts and push all the critical trend alerts to the nurse station. So they engineered a custom multi-sensor PCB with onboard signals fusions and AI-based anomaly detections. Smart hardware and the software was embedded solidly. So from a technical lens, it's very impressive. But here's the thing: that first iteration required millions just to reach the deployment in the clinical setting, and that was only to monitor around 50 patients over 1 week. So there's no tiered MVP strategy, no smaller feasibility pilot first, and they hadn't done phase validation, like for example, no benchtop trials, no retrospective data testing. So the regulatory plan was empty, and IRB approval has not been initiated. The clinical teams has agreed with the concept, but were contractually committed to supplying patients for study endpoints. So in reality, it's a fully scaled financial ask with zero risk mitigation checkpoints. Another story I want to share is a startup developing a 3-lead ECG wearable. They have already finished a pilot with 25 patients and were in talks with local distributors. The form factor was compact, right? The BLE sync was working and the firmware was stable. But here's the problem: they skip regulatory planning. They don't have a structured DHF. They don't have a risk file and no alignment with ISC 62304. So when the time they apply for a grant, the application fell on documentation, and on the business side, they have to postpone customer discussion and go back to rebuild the compliance foundation. And on the surface, the business looked like it was scaling, but on the structural side, it wasn't fundable. So in both cases, the team was not lacking effort or the brilliance. The thing they are missing here is the structured approach, and that's what we mean when we use the word funding readiness. So not just a feature, but the ability to give the investor the confidence that they can see the roadmap and the next phase is clearly defined. So how to solve that problem, right? Because many of them underestimate things like TRL mapping or planning for risk-based and alignment with clinical logic. So let's discuss structure and more specifically TRL, which stand for technology readiness level. This is a framework originally developed by NASA to measure the maturity of the system, and it's actually originally used for space technologies, aerospace technology. And it goes from TRL level 1 to TRL level 5, which is from theoretical concept to fully deployment in real world conditions. But now the idea is already canonized and being used widely in Medtech, and especially in grant assessment, clinical trials, and sometimes in VC, it can be used for early due diligence. And because it's very simple and straightforward, and it gives everybody a common language to answer one question, which is where are you exactly? And the funny challenge here is many startup founders think that they are at TRL level 7 or 6, but when we sit down and break it down, they actually only at level 3 or 4. because maybe why they have a prototype existing is still missing some user validation in real life, or they haven't integrated the risk documentation, or they missing QMS or software lifecycle processes, or system architecture is not traceable, right? So that's on the theories. So how we map the TRL to your journey. Let's now zoom in the early development journey from day one with that through around TRL6. This is the thing where the foundation get laid, and it's also where meaningful investor interest usually beginning to emerge to your startup. So from the first part, from TL1 to 4, the goal is not to build a complete product, to validate the feasibility and to build architecture clarity. So not only the core components like your sensor, your firmware, mobile app, and the cloud backend, but also how these components communicate. It interdepend with each other and how it fell. So without early system level thinking, many teams often fell into a corner with a lot of technical debts in the future that is hard to resolve. So at this stage, your proof of concept should focus on one simple question. So how does this work under control condition? Or don't start with can we build everything from a wish list, right? So does it work reliably in the lab setting? So that answer matters far more than how many features you have on your paper. So we strongly advise teams to start TL mapping early. The result of not mapping or under invest in de-risking is that a lot of impressive functionality, but not enough confidence for the speaker in what's coming next. So to avoid this, your prototypes should surface the most critical risk, not just showcase your strengths. And doing this will help you answer the question like, what could go wrong? What is still unknown? What have we deliberately excluded for now? And this is a very important question, because investors want to see what you have in your pipeline in the future and what you intentionally leave for the next phase. And that is a strategic judgment. More importantly, remember that your prototype must speak both engineer logic and investor logic. Don't just talk technical, right? You also need to discuss business matter, and that's including highlighting trade-offs, naming your assumptions, and clearly outlining your next technical and clinical steps, because the investor want to see the discipline from the founders. What has been tested, what hasn't, and why you didn't do that. So on the second hand, on the right side, when you move from level 4 to level 5 or 6, is many startups get stuck, maybe because of funding, because of technical, etc. But this is where the startup move from a working prototype to an investable product direction. So in order to make that leap, you need to anchor your development around clear funding and regulatory checkpoint. If you are building firmware and applying the right IC 6304 software safety class, even if it's early, if you're handling health data, your backend should be HIPAA ready or GDPR aligned, and it's not just encrypted, right? In parallel, we often have teams implement lightweight ISO 13485 controls, not a full QMS, but enough documentation discipline to keep things traceable, like design decisions, risk assessment, requirement mapping, without slowing down iteration, obviously. Sometimes we start development first, and then we can start with the QMS in the second iteration. So this light compliance lets you say fact, but also fundable. Your development should still run in agile sprint when talking about software, but the sprint need to map to real milestone, to clinical insight, signal quality data, risk mitigation evidence, not just the gyro tickets or internal velocity. So finally, package your work in a way that legible to investor. What matters is how much effort you went in, is how much rich came out. So at ITR, we don't stop at giving you a checklist, even though we will do when we send out the playbook. But jokes aside, we work with you to position your entire product stack with a TRL framework, from hardware and firmware to application, back-end, data pipeline, and even your clinical narrative. And in practice, we will discuss with you things like, okay, your device locks signal, and that's great, but is the data encrypted, labeled, time sync and formatted for downstream clinical analysis? Or things like, can you sync via BLE? Okay, but how are you controlling the version of the protocol, and can you handle OTA updates with rollbacks? So during the service, we help you define TRL levels, help you prepare the exact artifacts needed for grants or investor due diligence. We structure your risk by traceability metrics, stuff like that, and we also build your roadmap from clinical pilot to regulatory submission with clarity. Here's this to wrap up my parts. I want to leave you with this thought: being technically impressive is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need to turn that technical depth into a structured roadmap that let others, especially investors, trust what is coming next in your team. And the funding readiness is not just about hitting a milestone, it's about building a kind of clarity that de-risks your story. And at ITR, we have funders do exactly that. To founders do exactly that. Through co-development, to TRL mapping, through compliant integration and real-world architecture. Thank you, and we'd love to see you in face-to-face, one-on-one discussion about your project. So that's the wrap-up of my first part, my keynote about funding readiness and TRL. Before we move on, just a few quick notes. If you have the question, please keep it coming in the chat, and the more specific, the better. And remember to visit our landing page and submit your NDAs and your projects so we can offer you better help. And now let's bring everything closer to reality, not from the perspective of theory or external judgment, but someone who's actually been through it. So our next speaker, let me just switch the slide. There you go. Next speaker is Dr. Andreas Mitterer. He's from Switzerland. He's a founder with more than 20 years of corporate experience, and he left that world to build something from scratch in Medtech. And like many of us, he started with a functional prototypes, a strong network, deep global domain expertise. But what he discovered the hard way is that being technically solid doesn't mean automatically translate into fundable. He will share about his experience, the problem he sees in the market, something a little bit about his product, his projects, a little pitching session, but also he will share the story and the lesson he have learned, what's wrong in his early pitch round. So hopefully we can learn from that. And maybe there are some questions you will find yourself in his story, or things that he hasn't answered by himself, and he can bring up to us, so we can discuss and we find the solution together. This is not going to be a polished success story. It's an honest walkthrough from someone who's walked your path and who still believe in the product, but now approach it with a different kind of clarity. So hand over to you. Let's hear it from Andreas.
Okay, so hello, do you hear me? I think it's good, yeah?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, now, Juan, thanks for introducing me. And let me just give 5 words up front until we start to the first slide, yeah? As said, the funding readiness requires more than an idea, it requires a proven execution. So you need a functional prototype, is my key message here in the next following slides. Then you have a regulatory strategy to follow, you have a clinical roadmap, and look on the IP, your patent protection to marry your innovation, and you need an experienced team, and then a solid design house as a design partner. Let's jump to the next slide, please. So, a little bit about myself. I told you my name is Andreas Mitterer. So my background is electrical and chemical engineering. I have 25 years experience in medical device design and development. I started my career 10 years in quantum optics and research at the University of Innsbruck with Professor Zeilinger, who won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago. So that's a nice booster here. And then I moved to the medical device industry in leadership. I spent 15 years in Medel, it's a hearing implants company in Innsbruck. I was a project and team leader, also responsible for the approval of the implant in China. And after this experience, I moved on for another 5 years in Flextronics. I took on the role there as a senior director for medical devices with IoT connectivity. So Flextronics is a big EMS, electronics manufacturer service provider, the second biggest one after Foxconn. And we were engineering a design house like ITR is, and we designed for the big pharmaceutical companies medical devices. You'll see there is Merck, there's of course Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, all the famous brands I served there. And then I moved back to active implant design as vice president in the latest company here in Switzerland. So my core competence, of course, is implant system design, is the global and regulatory strategy. So that's the EU MDR and the FDA in the US. And then I love to work in the university and hospital collaborations. You can jump to the next slide, please. So the situation is that millions of people suffer from pain, incontinence, and obesity. Obesity brings you approximately 20 years less in lifetime. Yeah, so that's a strong problem here, and additional diseases, of course. So, and all these devices that we find on the market, they have a lack of digital integration. They are just focusing on a single indication. There is no flexibility, and they don't have a unified platform. Now, the vision is to translate this into a smart implant platform with up to 16 channels in a modular system, have a real-time biosensing for heart and muscle activity, nerve activity, and having wireless power and data transmission. Now, everything artificial intelligence driven, as we have it cloud-based, we can then increase the benefit for the patient. And this leads us, of course, to a multi-indication platform for pain, for incontinence, obesity, and future expansions are possible. Thank you. When we look in the traction and the validation, here you see on the slide things done with evaluation boards. And then from this first proof of concept, you go into a non-form factor board. You bring up a second prototype, which is now already in this case under development, and you think, of course, on the FDA and MDR roadmap and to have it established. So here, just to mention here, that's how I came up to know ITR. I have them here as a very competent partner, and then with such a device designed by a design house, you have a real good prototype which is ready for preclinical tests in the lab, but is ready for non-documented animal studies. And then in parallel, you bring up your manufacturing documentation. And with this, you can start documented animal trials, and then you bring it up to human trials. So with this said, you have 1 or 2 years of design, but then again, you need 6 years until you get an approval and until you can rise sales here. Okay, next slide, please. When we go with this in mind, that gets the funding requirement quite obvious. Yeah, so you want to have 1 million in the first year to finalize the prototypes. You have A, B, and C funding round, the seeding round. Yeah, so you easily add up to a 15 to 20 millions to get all the prototypes. But anyway, the R&D effort, take it as 30%. For a medical device, for an implant, you should always say 70% goes here for the documentation, and that you get ready for the notified body and for the approval. This brings us, of course, to the situation where the investor says, okay, what is the market strategy here? And the revenue stream is mainly to go to hospitals, of course, and the insurances and the governments. While since we have an app and all this interconnectivity, we gave a basic functionality to the patient, to the customer, while we can add additional features by subscriptions and, of course, increase our sales here. And, of course, as we plan a platform, we can also license it to OEM and other partners. Now, with this said, in the first phase, you need your key opinion leaders, especially you start with a niche indication, then you go in the second phase to broader clinical adoptions, and then you scale up to rise the sales numbers. Or you say, okay, with the approval, I go in an exit scenario and ask in the range of 3 to 500 million. Yeah, that's another scenario. So next slide, please. Still, why is this fundable? Of course, you're pretty much safe as you have such a long time to go. So there are not many people around, there are not many companies around. And it's de-risk the investment. It's de-risk because we have the technical validation and the proof of concept. We have a regulatory clarity with the notified body roadmap in place. We have a patent strategy during the development already from day one. We have an experienced leadership, and all the funds are allocated to the critical hires. And you have a defined clinical pathway. You go from animal to human trials, and you have, of course, the quality and regulatory expertise considered. Now, with this said, we can say that's all a nice story. And as Huang said, we want to get the readiness in this nice world. Nevertheless, you always find obstacles on the way. And here I just want to tell you 2 real-life stories, how you must not do it, yeah? Because now I told you how to do it, but it's good to know how you must not do it. So 2 examples. I had a clinical engineer as a colleague in one company, and he used our lab test equipment, which is not documented, on the patient without any ethical approval. So he failed, he gained no data, it was a total useless action. Nevertheless, he caused, of course, big troubles. And this is in medical, something I really want to tell everyone here, taking the shortcut always fails. The second story is, I had a CEO who insisted to find always shortcuts in the regulations and in the concept creation, to be fast on the market, as he insisted. All R&D managers, but also the board of directors, gave him warnings. But he, as the CEO, was very stubborn and insisted to work on 10 medical devices in parallel. He was spending 25 million every year. And after 4 years, and having spent 100 millions, having not spent, having burned and wasted them, he had to shut down his business. He left all the investors angry behind, and he lost millions of his own money. So the conclusion, just to be very clear, follow the standards, have a clear plan, and stay always focused. but be flexible to change to the various business and market situation. Because some competitor will leave the market and open a new area for you, which is already prepared. On the other hand, a competitor may come and make also leverage on your market. This is still a chance because doing it together may also attract more customers. Yeah. So stay focused, have a plan, but always be flexible. Thank you very much for your attention. I think I give it back to Juan now and say thank you. And I think we can discuss it later on in more details. Thank you very much. Juan, you're muted.
Oh, hi guys, I'm here. Yeah, I was saying, and thank you, Andreas, for sharing your products, your projects, and I hope that the project will be a success very, very soon. I know both you and us, ITR, still have many puzzles to be solved, but I'm positive that we will have things cleared out very soon within this year. So now for everyone listening, I hope Andrea's experience has sparked some reflection. So where is your roadmap actually going? So is it clear enough for others to believe in it? Or there are still pieces missing? Go ahead and drop it. If you have a question, drop it in the chat box on your right? And just check in before we continue. If you haven't submitted your question yet, it's a great time again. Don't miss out the exclusive or offer I mentioned earlier. Before we start this call, visit our landing page to share your project and unlock the 50 complimentary hours of technical consultation, and it will be tailored to your projects and boost your funding readiness. And we'd love to have you join us in our upcoming podcast series, which will be started after this webinar. We will start the production of the podcast, and hopefully it will be aired on Q4. So regarding, is everything clear or there are still pieces missing? That brings us perfectly to our next speaker, because that is exactly the clarity, is exactly what investors look for. So please welcome Ms. Beatrice Plaza Marin. She's an investor analyst at CRB HealthTech. Beatrice worked closely with early stage and growth phase medtech companies across Europe. She looks at teams, timelines, risk profiles, and help determine what is truly makes a startup investable. So today she'll walk us through the investor lens, how risk is evaluated, what red flags they are watching for, and how founders can align their roadmaps with capital logic, not just technical ambition. And just a quick reminder, again, if you have questions building up, don't wait until the very end. Drop them in the chat anytime, especially if they are complex or messy, because you're probably not the only one who are thinking about it. So Beatrice, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Really happy to be here, and thank you, Juan, for inviting us. So a brief introduction about myself. So I have a background in biomedical engineering and pharmacy, and I've worked across the spectrum of healthcare, from launching surgical technologies while I was working at Medtronic across different markets, but also now sitting on the investor side at CRB HealthTech. Briefly about CRB, we're a management firm founded in 2008 with 3 funds, 2 of them more focused on biotech and medtech, and recently launched at 50 million fund just focusing on digital health investments. We have already invested across 35 companies, and currently we look for companies raising their seed or Series A with initial tickets between 500K to 1.5 million, and that have their headquarters somewhere across Europe. So happy to jump into the content and hopefully it'll be helpful for many of you. So for us, as you've probably already identified, in early stage medtech, the founder becomes the true signal and the driver of the investment decision. Here, we're not just underwriting the technology, but we're really evaluating how the founder thinks, what they prioritize, how they build around uncertainty. And here you can see 4 pillars that we take into account when analyzing an investment opportunity. So first, we're looking for a builder mindset that acts as a problem solving machine. Builders tend to be continuously asking questions, and some of them can be, so what's the next uncertainty I need to reduce, and who can help me get there faster? And it's just a matter of continuously learning and building, right? Of course, part of this builder mindset is knowing the roles that need to exist within the company. And best founders bring in people who think differently to them and who fill the gaps that they might have less expertise of, and that they refer to and listen to them. Also, in addition to this, so we have the pillar of adaptability, right? In this space, things are shifting constantly, clinical signals, FDA guidance, and we see some founders getting stuck like in old assumptions. And I think the founders that treat every challenge as another design input or just as a learning are the ones that we want to see. Through it all, I think pretty obvious this one, but it's crucial, right, to stay connected to the market, not just talking to the users that from whom you'll be gathering data, but also understanding the decision makers, the payers, and the pathway to adoption, right? So yes, we're betting on the founder, but specifically on their ability to build clarity where there wasn't any, and to design around friction and to stay grounded in reality without losing the momentum and the vision of the company. So maybe moving on to the next slide about what we perceive as market readiness, right? So I believe that many times there's a misconception of what investors want, and that we want every single box checked, but we actually don't. It's practically impossible, I would say. But what we want to see is founders that understand which boxes matter now, right? And what they're doing in order to de-risk all the other boxes. So in addition to that, I think it's also important to be transparent in terms of the risk and the limitations you're identifying, because you always have them, right? And sometimes it might be related to the team members, sometimes it's about engaging with the right KOLs or accessing like international proof of concepts. But I think it's important to have them identified and mapped, because there's always some flaws in every plan, and as long as you're aware and you identify how to mitigate them, it's I would say positive to share them. To get a little bit more specific, so for example, when we talk about regulatory clarity, it might not mean already having like the FDA approval, but it's actually knowing like what feedback and sharing with us what feedback you've gathered already, and where that positions you in your journey, right? So sharing that clarity it's really important. And then in terms of early clinical traction, so it doesn't matter, and sometimes it depends, but like it's hard to get to that peer-reviewed publications already there. And sometimes it's just about engaging with the right KOLs and maybe having like 5 successful cases. And that can start to be early signs of traction. And what I think it's really important, it's that we understand that the current round lineups with the real milestones, right? So that you're not raising just to learn, but rather because you have a clear path to scale, right? And then, so going into the next slide, Juan, and some of the red flags that we identified and that might avoid us, right, from engaging with the company and with the founders. It's so having rigid or blindsided founders. Early stage Medtech companies should evolve, right? It's like a must. You cannot stick to your original plan, like never. And you really have to understand that the market's complex, it's regulated, and it's messy, and we don't expect you to have all the answers, but that you do adjust the questions to the moment in the market, right? We've seen technically brilliant teams that fail because they clung too tightly to their original vision. The second, I would say, it's the one that puts the solution first instead of the need, right? So I think really validating that there's a key pain that you're solving. It's really, really important. There's great technology that it's really exciting from a technological perspective, but maybe not from the market, right? And then another thing we see in founders, it's overconfidence. Sometimes they tend to make claims like game changing without having like real validation, right? And I think you have to be cautious with the promises you make. There's ways to generate excitement with proper communication without overselling expectations. And last, I briefly mentioned this in the first slide, but being a founder is not being a lonely wolf at all. You probably are not going to be able to solve everything. And I think a founder that tries and does it all and do it all, and that doesn't hire people and gets advice also from people who challenge them, I think usually ends badly. And then at last, we wanted to briefly touch on fatigue technology, which is a problem we often see in early stage Medtech companies. And this is, and what this means is that the team loses morale and direction because they're focused on the wrong drivers. Some of the things that might cause fatigue to set in, it's founders trying to optimize the product before validating it, or the tech roadmap being completely disconnected with the regulatory one, the founder having poor communication across team members, creating role confusion and just general burnout across the team. Also, the founder probably lacking implication across cross-functional tasks. So the founder has to do it all, has to be able to support all the different team members, right? And at last, I would say relying too much on big milestones to compensate the team instead of small wins, right? So some of the actions that we identified could build energy instead of actually creating that fatigue. It's engaging early with the end user, creating pilot data. It's always exciting. Then integrate like a planning and right guidance early on. And key, I would say, skills for the founder, it's to be grounded in humility and transparency, to have founders that are present, right, who listen and are willing to roll up their sleeves to support on things that they might be outside of their domain, but they have to support in order to bring them forward. And then at last, as I was saying, so celebrating every small win, right? So launching a pilot, joining a key advisor, the board keeps the engine running. And just to finalize, so I would say at CRB, we've back teams through those tough early phases, especially in the first two funds, and all the fundraising droughts and the trial delays and pivots that have to be adjusted. And I would say that the ones who really make it are those that communicate clearly, surround themselves with strength, but stay laser focused on learning. And I would say that's more or less what funding readiness means for investors and for us.
All right. Thank you, Beatrice. That was a very sharp and grounded perspective. Um, there's you can see her email and her website. Previously, you also see Andreas and his website if you want to visit and to know more about our speaker today. Um, Beatrice, I believe what you share is exactly what many founders in the room need to hear. That fundability is not about perfection; it's about having the right visibility and control over uncertainty. So from Andreas, we have heard the founder's view, the journey, the pivots, and the hard lessons. From Beatrice, we just saw the investor view, what builds trust, what raises question, and what stops a deal from moving forward. Just before we dive into our panel discussion, guys, keep sharing your question in the chat. Your input helps drive a richer conversation with our speaker. I'll check the chat box right now to see if there's any upcoming question. Let me see. Okay, I'll check the message. And don't forget to visit our landing page again to submit your project detail and NDA for 50 complimentary hours technical consultation for ITR. Now it's time to open the conversation, guys. We are moving into our panel discussion, and it's called "What Makes a Medtech Product Truly Fundable." It'll be joined by Dr. Andreas Mitterra, Ms. Beatrice Plaza Marin, Beatrice, and also Ms. Maria Ripple Patroli, Maria, head of Open Innovation from Barcelona and Madrid Health Hub. I believe they just changed their name. She's worked at the intersection of public health system, accelerators, and corporate partners across Europe. I'd like to introduce her. That's her slide. That's her portrait. Maria brings a unique lens on how early stage innovation actually lands in the real world, what blockers they face, and what partnerships are necessary, and how the communication like my people can accelerate that part. This is a great time to dive into real concern, technical, regulatory, business, even emotional, right? I'd love to hear from you as well. So please continue to drop your question in the chat. But first, Maria, how about introduce yourself a little bit again for the audience to know about you and also BHH?
Yeah, thank you, Juan. You already did a pretty good explanation of myself and Barcelona Health Hub, but I'll do a little bit more of an introduction. But first, I wanted to thank you for inviting us, everyone that joined, and also Andreas and Beatriz for their insightful conversation. Um, First of Barcelona Health Hub, we're a nonprofit association based in Barcelona and Madrid now. So yes, we recently changed our name, and we're already considered one of the biggest digital health associations in all of Europe. And what we do is we try to connect this ecosystem through really understanding who are the actors that forms it, what are their needs, what are their objectives, what are their strengths, and try to make these partnerships so that everything that it's being created ends up reaching either the patient or the professional or the right audience a little bit. This is what we do at Barcelona Health Hub. I myself, as an open innovation head, what I do is sometimes they call me a little bit like the Tinder of the ecosystem, to say it in a funny way that everybody kind of understands, is I learn a lot from discussions like what we just heard. I understand a lot of Andrea's perspective is understanding what their product is, what they need, and sometimes, like they said, they they want to reach the end product very fast, and that's just not possible. And so understanding what we can do slowly to get there So to build their confidence, build their trust, and to make sure to burn them too early, because most of the times these are good solutions that can do very good.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Maria. So I think you and our other two speaker, Andreas and Beatrice, will offer great story and great lesson for the audience. So first off, we received some questions from the audience from the registration form. I hope whoever make the question is here today. I have the first question. When should a startup think about a roadmap ahead? Uh, Let me see. Andreas, would you like to answer this question from your experience? Because I think you are the one with the longest experience among us three here today, and your experience with world largest companies. So now that when you're becoming a sole founder, have you think? Obviously, you show us the roadmap, right? But when exactly should you think a startup should think about a roadmap ahead?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty early thing you should consider in your plan. Uh, because when I think about my roadmap, it was clear what I need and so on, and I discussed it, of course, with sparring partners, yeah, and. I think it was one of the things that I was. It gets a little bit gray in the beginning, yeah. And when you think and when you make your plan and when you get focused on an indication, you immediately also see the roadmap. So I think this is an early thing that happens very early. And I would never start without it. Yeah, that's also clear. So at least at the end of your planning, you have to be clear with your roadmap.
Mm. So does that mean that nothing about the roadmap ahead and try to keep it lean is is the wrong way? Because I can see that even though I understand that medtech is different from common like consumer software or hardware, right? But is too too careful from the very beginning is also a mistake in your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's maybe, but no, you have to be clear here also for yourself, because
Mm.
without this, I think it does not, it should not be a blocker for you. Yeah, but I think as soon as you go to somebody and discuss it, the first question is, when will you do what? And then you
Mm.
have the answer. So therefore, you immediately, when you discuss it with somebody, doesn't matter if it's an investor or if it's a design house, you have to show your understanding of the roadmap.
I understand. I see. We also see a lot of founders. They come to us with a very clear roadmap, sometimes from a very early age. But then it's really important from our perspective that they should have a draft roadmap at least, and then they through different iteration it will evolve into a more fine-tuned journey for their project. So, how about other mistake you see founder makes? How about you, Beatrice? You met, I guess, hundreds of startups by now, and I believe you see a lot of geniuses and a lot of geniuses in quote. So, what are the common mistakes you see founders make?
Yeah, well, I already mentioned some of the red flags, and those are in the end just mistakes, because of maybe putting the focus on things that are not the most relevant at the stage that they're at. So I think one of the most common focus is just one of the most common mistakes is not having the focus at the right time in which you're currently at, right? Um, so that's why when I was hearing Andreas, I was like, as soon as possible. And even if it's not like you always need a plan in order to execute. Sometimes it's more realistic because you're closer to the market and you know better what you have to do, but you need a plan to reach there. So, um, but something that I did not mention, and that we've seen sometimes, it's when founders rely too heavily on borrowed conviction. And this is when we might see founders that build their strategy and just around an advisor, mentor, or an investor sometimes that might be business angels or just relevant in the industry. And there's a huge need for them to really challenge this. Don't take the first thing that you hear as the truth, basically. And I think it's just it's super important to be open to others challenging you, supporting you. But I think you always have to keep like analytical mindset of everyone's opinion, and not just move forward with a single one.
I see. I see. Um, when you talk about focus, right? And the one question I like to ask you to follow up with this question. This is a question from Ion Petrovai. I hope I get your name correctly. How will an investor know that the founders have a proper market focus? Maybe you can also help clarify this question as well.
Yeah, well, so some things we see sometimes, having a slide about Tam Sam Som with just big numbers. Obviously, it's a slide you have in your deck, but really grounding it right to what's happening in the market, and making sure that you transfer that knowledge to who you're pitching. And that probably comes from really gathering data from the true use cases. So talking to patients, talking to doctors, talking to all the different stakeholders, and kind of gathering that in order to build more of a bottom-up approach of the market, rather than just few highlights of a big TAM over $1 billion, right?
Yeah, and did she answer your question? I can see you have your camera on here. You can unmute if you want to elaborate more on your
Yes,
question.
that was exactly my point about the Tem Sam Sam, because everybody is dropping this and doing a Google and now doing AI build up of the slide, which has big numbers and not really connection with reality. The challenge that I see a lot with startups is they don't have in-depth understanding, or they are even afraid to go to the market to ask the people what is the reality, because the documentation will show let's say the visible side of the moon, but sometimes the opportunity lies on the dark side of the moon. And the challenge that I'm seeing as we're working with a number of HealthTech startups is that you either have medical people or technical people, and the people who understand actually from a business perspective the market are chasing bigger fish, and then at one point this needs to become a business, not just to become a product that will be validated and regulated or launched, because the devil is in this context happening. And I think the answer is right, but the question is how often is this actually happening, or what they could do to improve it? Because I see this as the major limitation. Okay, with your help, they can build a relevant product that can solve a relevant solution, but to make it into a business, that's another game, and it's let's say requires much more experience. That would be my comment on the topic. Maybe if you want to add a bit more. Thank you very much anyway for taking my question.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can see a lot of founders doing great presentation and sharing inspiring stories about their ideas and products, but like you mentioned, not many of them go out there and meet with actual people, actual customer, right? Um, well, um, well, Maria, you also meet a lot of founders. Meet a lot of founders, payer, provider. So, from your vantage point in the startup community, um, in those many founders you see, here's a funny story. Sometimes in the industry, you can develop sort of a sixth sense of who's going to be a successful one or who's going to have some problem very, very soon. So, what signs actually you can see and predict which founder will break through? Is there any
Well,
sign you can observe?
yeah, it's difficult to predict with certainty. Otherwise, I think Beatrice's job would be much easier. But there are some signs that are objective, and I think there are some signs that are much more subjective. For example, some of them have already been mentioned already. But first of all, I like founders that have a deep understanding of healthcare system and workflows, because digital health is a very different area than any other. Everything is slow, everything expensive, and I'm not complaining. I think it has to be. Anything that touches the patient needs to go through a very complex regulatory system because it needs to be safe. Nobody likes to be patient zero on anything that has been tested, either if it's a drug on a pharma, a product, or a device, or anything. So founders who normally break through almost always have this solid grasp of the complexities of these clinical environments, what stakeholders dynamics are, and you don't always need to have a good built product. Like Beatrice said, you don't need to have all the answers at the
Mm,
beginning, but you need to understand where and how it fits in these like often very rigid and very risk averse systems, or at least have the willingness to learn. And
mm,
that's why I always kind of recommend to very early stage startups to get strong clinical or regulatory advisors early on.
mm,
Startups need to be able to attract these credible clinical advisors to show that they're serious about navigating all these hard paths. And these relationships also often open doors to pilots, ethic boards, or even first customers more later on, because I think they need to understand. You asked before to Andreas, like how important it is to have a timeline or plan. And I think that if you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail, if I'm understanding. I'm not saying that the plan is the most important thing ever. It's going to change. You need to be flexible, but
mm,
you need to plan for longer cycles, slow procurement, evidence building, and don't get discouraged by this slow process because
mm,
everyone expects it in the community. They know, or creating massive teams right away. This is also a red flag. You see a startup that just begins with a massive team.
mm,
You need to be more understanding that this is going to be a long path. That's why I think, not to throw flowers on ourselves at the hub, but I think it's important to build a community of all the actors in the ecosystem to learn from
mm,
others, like this webinar is, to learn from founders and investors, but also learn from people you have right next to your desk, like what worked for you, what didn't, what challenges you had, and how did you solve them. So
mm,
creativity to learn and expand yourselves is going to get you early traction. And it's also a very ear to mouth sector. So I guess like this worked, this didn't. Sometimes they ask me, just like, hey, Maria, what startups do you know in this sector?
mm,
I do know a
mm,
lot of them, but the ones I remember the most are the ones that are more creative or that stuck with me. And I guess these are more objective, but as I said, there's also some subjective, like signs, which would be most of the times, and might be just a coincidence, that
mm,
startups that succeed, to say it in a way, because success looks different for every startup, are the ones that come from personal experience. Either a
mm,
doctor that saw patients in their previous lives suffering excessively from one pain point, or even patients themselves that came up with the solutions that fit them. And I think that's also a good point to have when you're planning, to hear from the people you're making a product from. Like, because
Mm.
then you can go through all the validations and everything. You're gonna put it into market after all that effort, and maybe just super simple. You're making a button for people in a wheelchair, and they tell you, "I can't reach it," and that was super simple, but you didn't plan for them. You planned for your product. So I think this is very subjective to know if they're really empathetic to what they're making, but it's also a sign to know if they understand what they're getting at.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I think community is really important. You guys, if you don't know, we can only organize this particular webinar with the help of Maria and BHS. We just joined their community not too long ago. We have a customer in Spain. We work. They are a customer who received a grant from CDTI, which is a government organization there in Spain. And we work with that customer, and from there we know about Spain market, we know about Maria, and then we know about Beatrice, and now we have this webinar, and talking about learning. I believe that right now we are, sometimes I talk with people that we are actually living in the future. What does it mean? It means that everything is just one click away. Everything is out there. Only do you have the curiosity and do you have the keywords to look for it? I believe so. So talking about learning, I believe communities like DHS can provide a lot to you, or wherever you are in Vietnam, in Australia, in UK, in Germany, Switzerland, Brussels, France. I believe there are community out there, and actually that's my plan to visit every community in Europe at the end of this year after I visit Düsseldorf trade show in Germany, and I would love to meet you all there. Um, circle back to the topic learning. Andres, I have two questions for you. Um, what is the one hard lesson you've learned transitioning from corporate R&D to startup execution that underestimate, and now that you're looking back, what did you believe early on that turned out to be a myth when you started building as a founder?
Yeah, it's a little bit, you're always spoiled in a big organization, yeah. And when I look back in Medel and also in Flex, you have a very good quality regulatory department, and everything is just a tip away, yeah. And you just go to the coffee and then you discuss it, yeah. But when you have a startup, there you have no supporting system. Everything must be translated into discussions. And what is used to be a team of 10 people in a corporate lab now is, of course, on my own shoulders. I also have to check, of course, with the budget discipline, and yeah, everything is just a survival tool. And all of a sudden, you are this classic, famous Swiss Army tool, yeah. So you do everything.
All right. Thank you, Andres. I can see some question in the chat box here. Let me just raise it. What are some of the most common product level mistakes you've seen from technical founders with a strong academic or clinical background? To repeat the question, what are some of the most common product level mistake you've seen from technical founders with a strong academic or clinical background? Uh, well, in this question, how about you, Andres? I have some perspective from ITR, but you as a founder and you launch a product from the ideation phase to the mass production phase and commercializing it. What is your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, now if the question is a little bit hard, but for me, I was always involved in things that work, yeah. So where I had a solid science basic, yeah, and then you brought it into someone, and then I designed it into mass production. So there was no question that it does not go. I had some people and I had some projects where I look at it and it looks odd, and then it does not work. So, but to make this now in a real short sentence is a little bit hard. So maybe you, from your experience, can put it a little bit in a more crisp picture as I'm able now to do it. Yeah.
Well, from our perspective, from ITR perspective,
Mm.
um, the product level mistake that I've seen from technical founders with strong academic or clinical background is that uh, they 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 can be over engineering the prototypes.
Mm.
Because many of them often try to build a perfect device upfront, full feature, sophisticated signal processing, and believe it or not, many of them out there mainly do the research and scientific and technology part before having some business experience, or if they were in some business, they are more often lean to the research and development department. So yeah, before proving uh, the products actually solve any regulation or the de-risking and the system architecture. I think that is one of the very common problem that I can see from the founders. Yeah, so that's a question from Jack Snyder. Thank you very much. I can see one question here from Jianing Cheng. Hi, Beatrice. Given that China has fewer standout medical device products compared to the EU, what key factors do investors consider when evaluating Chinese medtech startups? And could this gap be a barrier to funding?
Thank you for the question. I'm being completely humble with my experience so far and our focus. We haven't looked at the Asian market at all, and not China, so not super familiar with the regulation there. And so I believe I cannot give you a lot of insights into that, unfortunately. Um, yeah, I just don't want to make any assumptions that I haven't had the chance to
Mm.
explore.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm not sure if the Miss or Mrs. Channing Cheng. I hope that in the future we'll work with a VC somewhere here in Southeast Asia or in China. But for now, I guess because from the very beginning, we have been promoting this event to the audience in Europe and in the US. So maybe it's just not just the right appetite or the business strategy for the VC. Uh, hey, there you go. I can see some Linda Lind introduce herself. There you go. You can contact her directly. All right. So let's go back to Maria. Is there any story that's one unexpected way your community has helped a founder move forward, whether it's in products, funding, or just staying resilient? Can you share some story about the members in your community?
Yeah, like as I said, like community is very important, but not just any kind of community. Like not all connections are good connections in the sense that not all of them are going to tell you where to go. So
Mm.
also connections, sometimes we think of like going to networkings or things that are very business focused, and that's good spaces like this one. But I guess, and I don't know if it's just the Spanish market because we're kind of that way, but also creating spaces where it's more fun also helps people create relationship with more trust, and those end up being the stronger connections because that's why I'm saying, like, I don't know if it's just Spain because we do love to hang out after work or have a beer or something. But normally, as a hub, when we're creating events, we try to think about them as well. Like networkings in the afternoon, people have their families, they have other things to do that they would rather prioritize than keep working. But if we frame it in a more fun way, we've had better turnouts, honestly. Just
Mm,
beer and they get to talking, and then maybe connections are happening that I didn't even think about them myself. So I
mm,
think that's a good opportunity. I'm not saying go to everything. I'm saying
mm.
be aware of everything that's happening around you and choose for yourself where you think the connections for you are going to be at.
I see, I see. Absolutely. Actually, there's another question from Jane Becker to you as well, Maria. How can ecosystem platform like BHS help teams struggling with cross-border scale up, especially when navigating multiple EU regulatory environment? So,
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I guess I can only talk about BHH or MHH from my experience, but for us, it's important to, as well as having international partners like ITR can be, it's also having institutional partner elsewhere, like finding similar hubs or other actors that are interested in digital health to be able
mm,
to introduce them to a partner that will be able to guide them a little bit. I did study international relationships, but I'm not an expert in all regulatory and all medical
mm,
systems everywhere. But what I can do if they tell me, "Hi Maria, I'm interested in expanding to the Middle Eastern market," to put an example, me
mm,
myself not give them any advice, but I might be able to connect you to someone who will, and they will be able to give them the exact advice. I think that's why I think a hub is a good place because there's no one person that will be able to give you the answers, but a
mm,
group of people will be.
mm. Thank you, Maria. So, Jen, go ahead and drop Maria an email. You can see an email from Maria and Andreas and Beatrice and I myself on the screen. I hope this screen is still showing. Are you guys seeing the screen? Yep. Cool. All right. We have quite a lot of quality question. I think we have an amazing and very productive discussion as well as answering some very interesting questions. If you guys have any further question, feel free to drop it in the comment. We will maybe now we don't have a lot of time left, but we'll probably return to you in an email or a personal outreach. So to wrap up our discussion today, maybe how about all of you help me um, answer, maybe give an advice, or maybe talk about yourself or organization, what message do you want to send to the audience today, um, and how they can reach out to you. How about starting with Andreas?
Yeah, of course, reach out to me by email and so on and LinkedIn. And what I do, I want to give everyone a good feeling and really motivate him to bring up his ideas, yeah, and drive them further and think how you can get them into the market.
Mm. Thank you, Andreas. How about you, Myra?
Yeah, for myself, I just want to, like, I know a lot of my interventions were that it's hard and that everything is a long road and it might be expensive, but I don't want to discourage people because I do think that innovation is important, especially when we're talking about health. We want to live longer and we want to live better. So if you have anything in that sense, go ahead and find the right partnerships and find the right support because I do think it's important to innovate in that. And please feel free to reach out to me for anything.
Beautiful, beautiful. And lastly, Burgess, the VC woman.
Yeah, no, Yeah, thank you for the invitation. As I said before, feel free to reach out. I think also a part of about being close to the market, it's connecting early on with investors and understanding what we're looking for. And we do tend to support companies closely by engaging with them in continuous conversations, let's say, and identifying the things that we're not seeing yet, but that if we do, we might start considering the opportunity more seriously, right? But apart from that, just wanted to also be we do, even if we are sometimes harsh, feel really inspired by all the innovation that we come across. And I would just, as a final advice, keep close to the problem, move with great intention, and ask for help because you're probably going to need it at some point.
Cool, excellent, guys. Either speakers or people, audience in the audience. This is all about community as much as about the content. So I'd like to invite each of your speaker to drop your LinkedIn or your email address in the chat, even though you already showed it on screen. So if you resonate with that they said, the audience, feel free to reach out to them directly. While they are doing that, I'd like to wrap up what we've learned today. I believe that we have discovered a lot in the past 70 minutes, and I hope that it sparked some very real questions for your own journey. I also like to wrap up what we've learned today. We start with the big idea that technical validation is totally different from investor readiness, and how clarity is what gets you funded. Petrus then gave us the inside view from a VC lens, showing how funders evaluate not just what your device does, but how do you manage risk, timeline, regulatory visibility, and some in her mind is, from a VC perspective, is a red flag. Maria helped us see the role of the community not just as a support network, but as an ecosystem that fosters momentum, connection, and early stage credibility. And last but not least, Dr. Andreas Mitterrand gave us the unfiltered view from the front lines, the real life gaps, the pivots, and the conversation it takes to turn good techs into the fundable and scalable business. So yeah, and on a lighter note, you know that I often close meetings or webinar with a joke about grabbing a beer, but this time I say something better. Tomorrow, the entire ITR team is heading off for our annual company trip to a small beach town nearby with family and all. So if we don't answer your email right away, I'm sorry, it's probably because someone is chasing the kids in the sand. So thank you again for joining us, and genuinely thank you for taking our work seriously enough to show up on a conversation like this. We hope to see you again in one of our upcoming activities, whether it's the podcast, the Q4 webinar, or maybe in person in Medical Fair Thailand or in Medical Düsseldorf. Thank you and see you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye and thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye guys.